In this video, we pay attention to finding an inverse function. We have this example to solve. We have the function f of x equals e to the power of x plus 1, and we want to find the inverse function denoted as f minus 1x. Step 1, we have our function here. The domain of this function is the set of whole real numbers. All the values on the real line can be obtained. So first I need to find what is the domain of my function. Then I solve for x. F of x equals e to the power of x plus 1. Y is f of x, e to the power of x plus 1. E to the power of x equals y minus 1. We want to solve with respect to x. Natural logarithm on both sides. At this point, we find what is the domain of the inverse function. So here we have x equals natural logarithm of y minus 1. So the inverse function, we switch back to x, is natural logarithm of x minus 1. The domain of the inverse function is 1 plus infinity. So the x minus 1 should be strictly greater than 0. So x should be strictly greater than 1. So this is the domain of my function, and this is the domain of my inverse function, f minus 1. Now, the range of the function f is the domain of the inverse. So f of df is 1 infinity. Now the range of the inverse function is the domain of function f, and this can be written as f df minus 1 equals minus infinity infinity. So the domain of the function f is the set of real lines. The range of the function f is the domain of the inverse function is 1 infinity. The domain of the inverse function is 1 infinity. The range of the inverse function is the domain of the function, which is minus infinity infinity. And why is that? This is the function, this is df, this is f of df. This is the domain of the function f, and this is the range. So I map the values that are in the domain and the values that are in the codomain by this process. If I want to go the other way, I need the inverse function. So the domain of the function f, the domain of the function f is the range of the inverse function. The domain of function f is the range of inverse, and the domain of the inverse is the range of f. So these functions f and f minus 1, they undo each other. We can see an example. You see f minus 1, f of x. We take f and we plug it back to the inverse. So it's natural logarithm of e to the power of x plus 1 minus 1. So we get back the identity x, the identity function. If we work the other way around, we put the inverse back to the function f. We have e ln x minus 1 add 1. The exponential and the natural logarithmic function are inverse, so we end up x minus 1 add 1 equal to x. So what we obtain here is that if I impose f minus 1 f minus 1, I get back the identity function. I hope this video is useful for you. This is a very basic example. This is just a basic exponential function adding a constant, and is one-to-one function and is invertible, so it's easy to find the inverse by solving for x. And you have to be careful when you find the domain of the function is the range of the inverse, and the range of the inverse is the domain of the function, and the domain of the inverse function is the range of f. Finding inverse function is not an easy task. You have to be careful of the function that you are looking at and do the steps and the thinking process in a meticulous way.